Hello friends, fellow artists, and Art League family. This is Willaim McMahon. Thank you so much for joining me again. Today I'm going to be unveiling how to draw a human eye, general generic from Straight On, part 2. So the image you saw a moment ago, the rendering of that eye, I'm going to transform it into this. Hope everyone enjoys. Alright, so in trying to push this drawing forward, I'm going to try to do so in maybe 10 minutes. Again, the first drawing that I did in a manner where I was trying to be very instructional and share kind of general principles about how to create and build an eye and to conceptualize drawing an eye. In this part 2 of drawing a human eye, I'm going to try to move the drawing forward and soften it down and make the drawing more representational and also more three-dimensional. And the way that I'm going to make a drawing appear more three-dimensional is by pushing my values. We want to have rich dark values, bright white values, and a range of grays in between that. And when I ask people, sometimes I'll say, okay, so if we're going to build a drawing, we get the structure down first and we check our proportions, and then what's the next step? And people will say shading. And I'll say, okay, great, but how do we know how and where to shade? And that's all based off light source. So again, I have my light source in the upper left corner. The deepest part of the human face is the upper inner eye socket, so I'm instinctively going in and pushing my values in that area to take the viewer back into that recession. Now, if you see here, I had kind of a harsh line there with the upper eyelid. I'm kind of softening that down, making that transition a little bit smoother and more naturalistic. Again, as I mentioned in the first video, we want to think about eyelids as having depth and dimension, enough depth and dimension to cast a shadow onto the eyeball, which I'm doing now, and also to capture and to catch a highlight on the lower eyelid rim. So I'm gonna try to play that up. If you see what I was doing a moment ago using the Faber-Castell jumbo pencil, I'm at this point largely doing blending, less hatching. However, I'm still following the kind of direction of those hatch marks in my blending. And so I describe this sort of value application as contour blending. And an artist I work with named Nancy, she was the first artist that kind of helped me think of. I used to think of blending as being just sort of circles, small circles to create even value, and then hatching being lines. And then the more I've taught art and the more I've thought about it and drawing, I see that there's different ways to kind of blend these different mark making, value creation. And now I'm going through and I am getting rid, because that was my eye socket. That was I drew that in as a reminder of the shape of the eye socket. There is no physical line on a person around their eye socket. And if you see once more, I am bouncing around the drawing and progressing it as a whole. Again, if you're putting a little bit of value on the tear duct, that's nice. And then you want to try to hold a highlight on the tear duct as well. Nice and dark in the pupil. We want to make the pupil be the focal point of a portrait drawing. So we're going to lean on that nice and dark. Getting rid of a lot of harsh lines and edges. We block in shapes when we do our drawings. We want to try to conceptualize the human head and really the human form in general as a collection of shapes fitting into one another. This is why it's important to practice still life drawing and to have establish a distinct light source, and then to do drawings from observation to understand how light works on objects, how highlights are created on those objects, and how shadows are both created on the objects and then cast from those other objects either onto a surface or onto other objects. However, with something like a face, we're not going to have distinct lines, usually dividing areas. This is a distinct line because that's a shift from the flesh of the eyelid onto a wet, glassy surface, which is the eyeball. So that will be a line. But transitions from forms taking place under the same flesh, we're going to want to go through and soften those lines out. And for these longer marks, you see that I'm holding my mark-making tool closer to the base to facilitate soft, long, blended marks. I'm really thinking this whole time of the eye as being a full three-dimensional sphere existing in a recessed area, the eye socket, the deepest part being the upper inner eye socket, that is then encapsulated by eyelids that have depth and dimension. And as I mentioned earlier, enough depth and dimension to both cast a shadow onto the eyeball and to catch a highlight on the lower eyelid rim here. And if you see in shading both my upper and my lower eyelid, I am using soft, horizontally oriented blended marks. I'm using horizontal contours, contour blending, and then got a little bit too dark there. I'll use my kneaded eraser at this point. The kneaded eraser is a great tool for very soft removal of value. The Tombow Mono Zero eraser will be a great tool for more precise erasures or reductive hatch marks. So using these horizontal contours is informing the viewer. Now, since there is a distinct shift between the eyelid and the surface of the eyeball, I'm going to lean on this line heavier, and then really I'm going to take my mechanical pencil, which should be more for my details, my hatching, my precision, and I'm going through and I'm rendering the cast shadow from the upper eyelid onto the eyeball using vertical marks. Changing the direction of the mark is going to be just a further signifier to the viewer that there's a real shift happening here. Now I also have a dirty blending stump here, and some people think that blending stumps are cheating. I don't know why. I don't historically use them too much, but for the sake of time and to try to soften this drawing down and just to further showcase more tools, I wanted to pull this out just to soften the drawing down a bit and make it a bit more representational, less stylized. So again, thinking about that sphere, shading in a manner where I'm considering how the direction of my marks can further inform the viewer. I'm getting, when I put my hand across the drawing as I just did, I'm necessarily blending the drawing a bit, and a lot of people just use their finger for blending, which is okay. The argument against using one's finger for blending is that we're always going to have a certain degree of oil on our fingertips. Myself specifically, I might have sort of neon orange Cheeto dust or something like that also in the mix. So if you can use something like a blending stump, that can be helpful to alleviate the possibilities of staining your drawing in some way. Going and softening down. This was my outer eye socket edge, my cheekbone. Put that in there for context. I'm kind of softening it back down now as I'm trying to move the drawing more towards straight representation. Temporal ridge, brow ridge. This is the brow ridge here. This is what the eyebrow is going to rest on. Again, upper inner eye socket is going to be the deepest part of the face. Now I'm going to return to the eyebrows. Going to add a little bit of texture now to the drawing. Eyebrows and eyelashes. I'll use hatch marks again because each hair of an eyebrow, each eyelash is going to be sort of like a hatch mark. And you don't want to be actually too precise, especially in rendering your eyelashes with kind of marks like this. You don't want to be too precise with that. You want to be a little bit rougher. Think of drawing as a push and a pull. Get information down on the page, evaluate it, and then respond to it. Try to keep your drawings as light as possible for as long as possible. You should be in no rush. For me, I'm trying to produce videos in a timely manner. They can be absorbed relatively quickly and can be learned from. However, drawing is not a race, so don't be in a hurry when you're drawing. Try to hold your, hold off on details and pushing strong values until later in your drawing. You want to figure everything out in your light, loose searching phase. Respond to it, modify, push and pull. Eraser is hugely important. Bounce around your drawing, progress the drawing as a whole. Right now, the iris, I have very light, very few lines. That's going to make the viewer believe that this person's eye is very light, a very light blue, maybe a very light gray or green, or a really light brown. This here, I call that the soft fleshy patch. That would be this sort of area. And there's huge variation from person to person on how prominent that patch is, how much it overlays across and on top of the eyelid, what angle it exists at. I had mine fairly strong on there. I'm going to soften that down, minimize that line, make this transition more naturalistic. And one other thing too that you'll see, I'm standing up to try to adjust my angle. Normally when I'm drawing, I am rotating my paper all the time. I'm always trying to facilitate mark making that's the most comfortable for me. So I'm usually rotating my paper and also being mindful of smearing or smudging my drawing. Rotating one's paper can help a great deal. making this soft fleshy patch softer and the transition all softer. I'm going to go and I'm going to add a bit more value to the iris so it's not quite so light. Then I'm going to push my eyelashes to pop them forward just a little bit more. They've gotten a little bit lost. Doing these rolling hatch marks. Again, I'm not worried about getting them too precise. And then generally eyelashes are going to be thicker, fuller, longer towards the outside here. And they're going to kind of flatten out and become more sparse as we move towards the tear duct, towards the center of the face. Then the lower eyelashes are going to be a little bit less long, a little bit less thick. I'm going to come back, reinforce the value in the iris. And again, I'm using hatch marks that are concentrated towards the outside rim of the iris. And each mark I'm wanting to have shooting in towards the center of the pupil. And during the course of this drawing, again, as I mentioned, I haven't been rotating my hand. I've been mindful of the side of my palm touching the paper, but I haven't been too concerned about that. A little bit of kind of softening down and blending I'm okay with. And part of the reason for that is it's going to give me a nice forum, and I'll just kind of get a little bit of soft value going across the whole piece to make everything a bit softer and more unified. But again, if I get this value, this soft blended value, that gives me an opportunity to use my Tombow Mono Zero eraser as a very precise tool for achieving very distinct highlights. Take my Tombow. I'm going to click out the eraser just a little bit. I'll erase the tip to make sure that there isn't residual graphite or colored pencil or anything like that on it. And then I'm going to have the tip be just a little bit out. I'm going to come and try to achieve a more distinct, crisp highlight along there, and certainly on the eyeball to show the viewer that the eye is wet and reflective. And that is going to pretty much conclude how to draw an eye, part 2, pushing the drawing forward. I hope that everyone's drawing. Hope that you enjoyed the video. Please consider subscribing to the Art League Online. We really appreciate any subscribers, likes, comments. It means a lot to us. We're working hard to provide consistent, strong educational content for everyone. Appreciate you checking out the video. Thank you all again so much for spending your time checking out this video. I hope that part 2 was beneficial for everyone. Please consider clicking on that little bell icon beneath this video. That would then give you guys notifications on whenever we post a new video. Art League Online, we're working hard for you guys. Keep drawing.